we are being accused that these guys are not paying tax. They're making a lot of money. Yes, we're making a lot of money, but we are paying our share, in fact, more to the government exchequer. Individual effort is starting on climate finance, irrespective of what Mr. Trump thinks. Obviously, Mr. Trump doesn't believe in climate change, but that part is not going to affect Pakistan immediately. I mean, he can stop the funding of World Bank or whatever, but I don't know what he's going to do. But at the moment, IFC and some other organizations are continuing business as usual of what they want to do on the climate finance.
When you go to an account and you need to have a utility bill or a phone bill or something, it's just tedious to shift accounts. Hello and welcome to All Things Money. My guest today is Muneer Kamal, CEO and General Secretary of the Pakistan Banks Association. Hello, sir. Welcome to my show. It's a pleasure having you.
Taking me in this program.
So recently, the Pakistan Banks Association held the first ever Pakistan Banking Summit. What were your hopes and expectations going into the summit, and what kind of response did you get?
This banking summit was actually a result of an introspection that the banking sector did early last year, middle last year. And we came up to the program that there are certain areas that bank needs to strengthen. SME, agri, digital. And this discussion led to the fact that we had never done a banking summit. So we wanted to share what we had come to the conclusion. So we wanted to share with the rest of the people, the policy makers, the relevant stakeholders. So we decided to do a summit. And we ended up doing a 2-day summit, which not only included the SME, agri and digital, but we included ESG part, which included the climate side of things that we are facing, and inclusivity and developing leadership. So we had a fantastic 2 days, and the results were, to be honest, much more better than what we had expected. So we are very enthusiastic about it, but we are not going to finish it there. Our next step is to go through content of each such session that we had, and then develop things to do after that. So we will start this process in about 15-20 days, and then we seek each area like SME, agri, digital and others, what is required to fulfill what we want to achieve in the banking sector. So that was the background.
So I was there at the Pakistan Banking Summit, and I think the two things that stood out for me was when I entered the room, it was a sea of dark blue suits. So when we talk about inclusivity, when I attend banking events, there are no females there, much less on the stage.
That is exactly why we included this session, because we understand the fact that the females in Pakistan work environment and indeed in the banking sector. But banking sector is still far ahead with the rest of the people, and I'll tell you why. Out of about 160,000 permanent employees of the banking sector, we are at about 23,000 female. So I'm very confidently, I say that about 30,000, mashallah, educated females, educated because minimum qualification is BA. So educated females are working in the banking sector. Indeed, at the top level, you don't see much, but we've already seen a president of the second largest private sector bank, UBL, Seema Kamil.
We have Seema Kamal, we have Shamsad Akhtar, and then
No, and these are the trendsetters, and inshallah we'll get a crop. And again, the fact that we included inclusivity as a separate section was because of the fact that we've come to the conclusion that the banking sector needs to do more in bringing out the females at the top level and the middle level.
Absolutely, I think we need female leadership.
Absolutely.
Across sectors.
Correct.
Another thing that stood out for me at the banking summit was the repeated emphasis on how much tax the banking sector pays. And I think you're probably the sector that is paying the most.
Yeah.
And I get it. No one wants to be paying so much tax. I think it was at 54%. But then again, if not the profitable sector, the most profitable sector, then who is we were talking...
Because the reason is because we were told and repeatedly told, and the media covered only one aspect, profitability. Not realizing that how much contribution to the government is taking place. And that's where the whole story of ADR came up. And in ADR, all we were saying was that...
ADRs are advanced deposit ratios, and they're an SBP requirement to push banks into lending more to the private sector.
Correct.
And there's a lot of controversy around it.
The controversy was frank. You said SBP requirement. It wasn't an SBP requirement. And this was one of our issues. The only entity in this country or anywhere else in the world who can tell the banks how much lending they need to do, 50, 100, 25, is the central bank of the country. In our case, that's State Bank of Pakistan. In this case, it was applied by the FBR that if you do not lend up to 50% on the balance sheet, we will tax you X amount. And
Is that under FBI's jurisdiction?
that is exactly our point. That was, we were thinking, that, and by the way, the other distortion of this tax was, it was applied to the balance sheet. Taxes are applied to the income. So these were the two aspects we said. FBR has no jurisdiction. The only entity that can tell us how much to lend is the central bank. And if you want to take, and that's where the debate started in, guys, we are already paying X amount, and yes, talk to us. We are ready to pay more. Before the ADR went out, which was in December, the bank's tax in any case was the highest in the world. The normal corporates pay 29% tax on 10% surcharge, 39%. The banks were paying 39% tax, 10% surcharge, almost 50% tax. So when we finally negotiated and it came out to good result, we are ending up 54%. So from the rest of the bank corporate sector, we are paying 15% more. And yet we are being accused that these guys are not paying tax. They're making a lot of money. Yes, we're making a lot of money, but we are paying our share, in fact, more to the government exchequer.
I think speaking as the common person, as a salaried person, I think I'm so heavily taxed that when I see banks being profitable, then I think most people think it's okay for banks to be taxed. Banks are always painted the villains.
By the way, that's exactly what we did. When we negotiated, okay, we're going to pay 5% more tax. In December, just a couple of months back, we'll pay more tax, but this nonsense of ADR, which is disruptive, it is disrupting the market, should be taken away. That was only our comment. We were not saying that we don't want to pay taxes.
So you're fine with the 54% being increased as long as there's no ADR requirement?
Because, again, I will repeat, ADR was creating distortion in the market. You don't tax balance sheets. You don't dictate Pakistan or any banking sector, other than the central bank, i.e. State Bank, some other entity, FBR, saying, Acha, now look at this irony. If we do 50% tax, FBR doesn't get any additional tax. That was the from ADR, because ADR said if you are less than 50%, then we'll tax you X amount more. So if we reach 50%, no tax. How can they conclude at the beginning of the year that we'll collect X amount of tax on ADR? So it was distortion. And I think everybody, Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, FBR, and FBR, by the way, they're very hardworking people. It's a very, very tough job for them to collect taxes. An X amount of target is given to them, and these guys really, and the ones that I've dealt with, very smart people. But it's not their jurisdiction.
Do you think with the tax policy office being separate now that the distortion created by the taxation system can be addressed?
No, in this particular case, I'm just talking about the ADR. That was creating distortion.
Because it was in FBI's interest that the banks do not meet the ADR target.
Let's talk about it. It wasn't FBR's interest. It was Islamabad's interest, because they're dictated that they have to create X amount. FBR is just the agency that goes out. So
basically, you were being set up for a fall.
No,
if you would argue that, because if Islamabad wants you to pay credit, to lend credit to the private sector, but they won't collect tax if you actually do that. So, it's a catch-22.
And there is a reason for that. And it's a very normal thing to say, and they're right, that the lending deposit ratio is about 45%, right? So the criticism on the banking sector, on the face of it, is absolutely justified. But you have to see why is it like that? India and Bangladesh, their ADRs are about 78%. Ours is not even 50%. Why? India and Bangladesh, since let's say last 18 to 20 years, have grown on an average about 6.4 or 6.5% on an average. Growth in the economy is running, there's demand for credit. In Pakistan's case, 2008 we had an IMF program, 2013 we had an IMF program, 2019 we had an IMF program, and as we speak we have. Each time an IMF program comes, there are brakes applied. The economy slows down because it's runaway inflation and all those things need to be controlled. So Our GDP growth average in the last 18 to 20 years is merely about 3%. So it's reflected in the demand for credit also. Or not only in demand for the credit, it is risky. Don't forget the fact we are responsible to our depositors because they have given us money without even knowing what we are going to do with it. That is why for banking sector there has to be a strong regulator. So the demand is low. We need to be careful. There are risks in the market. Inflation, interest rates are 22%. You will buy a car at 22%? No, you will not. Most of the people won't. You'll wait for the interest rates to come. So when the interest rates were 22%, the demand for credit shrunk. So if the economy gets back on the track, there will be lending, of course.
You mentioned there's limited demand because the interest rates were so high. Now that the interest rate is 12%,
Yeah.
and on the face of it, perhaps the monetary easing cycle has ended. Do you think there's be fresh demand, or that LSM, because it's a negative right now, there will not be more demand?
Large scale manufacturing from private sector or public sector, they generate a big demand for credit. And at the moment, you're right, I think last I saw there's negative growth in large scale manufacturing. But hopefully, with the interest rates coming down, with a time lag, the manufacturing side, large scale manufacturing and other sectors will start developing and start running a little bit. And the moment that takes place, the demand for credit of the private sector as well as public sector will increase. No question about that.
Again, I would assume that the demand of credit is also linked to exports. We need exports to go up so that the large scale manufacturing has that demand. So, do you see that happening?
Exports, any sector which is not performing well, like for example textile, there are certain parts of textile which is doing fabulously well. The spinning and others are at
The
the
energy
moment there is pressure.
intensive sectors, yeah.
Energy intensive textile, the energy cost is very high. So whether it is export or any other sector, if there is depression there and the growth is not at a regular pace, then yes, the demand for credit will go down.
There have
And not only demand for credit will go down, bankers, and rightly so, will be a little hesitant of taking too much risk.
in your experience, and you have seen the many boom bust cycle that the country has gone to, we are still in the stabilization phase.
Absolutely.
Do you think now is the time to shift from stabilization to growth, or
Not yet.
remain here?
My personal issue, it's too early for growth. If the moment we push growth before actual stabilization, we're still in the process of that, then what it generates is a growth and it becomes out of hand. And then it starts getting pressure on the current account deficit. The moment the current account deficit goes out of control, then the big question mark comes in, are we going to default or whatever? So at the moment, I think we need to persist, and that is exactly what the Ministry of Finance is stating also, and they're right. At the moment, forget about growth, let's first stabilize it.
And granted, we are in the stabilization phase, but and some of the indicators are very positive. The Pakistan stock market, for example, remittances are crossing, I think they're crossed 25 billion by now. But have structural reforms taken place that when we go to the growth phase, we will not enter the boom bust cycle again?
Well, that phase is yet to come. As I said, I don't think this is the time for the growth.
No, but have we laid the foundation for the growth?
No, that is why we're in stabilization and not running, because we are not fully in that process, is not yet complete. So it's going to be completed. That's the time to run. Will it take a year, 2 years? I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert, but I get the sense, very strong sense, that at this point in time, we are still deeply in the stabilization phase, and the growth is at the moment. No, I don't think there's a time to throw caution to wind and start growing.
Okay. So, on a tangent, you're one of the few people, or perhaps the only one, who is part of the Pakistan Banking Summit as well as Breathe Pakistan. Now, climate finance and everything climate related was huge before Trump. And I think there was an entire session at the Pakistan Banking Summit of all the changes that Trump is bringing and all the changes that AI is bringing. So, for a two-pronged question, what's the level of digitization in the banking sector? How AI will affect it? And on the other hand, with Trump's disinterest towards climate change, would that influence policies at home?
Look, for example, we're dealing with IFC these days, and the climate director of climate was here. There are certain parts which is business as usual, and there is a lot of focus on climate financing and a lot of bonus on climate change that we are talking about.
Is there a business case for it?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm on the board of a company called Infrazamin.
We had Mahin Rahman at one of the podcasts.
By early April, I think, if not mid-April, she's going to do a 2 billion rupees green bond, green agri bond, which is going to be listed on the stock exchange. So that individual effort is starting on climate finance, irrespective of what Mr. Trump thinks. Obviously, Mr. Trump doesn't believe in climate change, so but that part is not going to affect Pakistan immediately. I mean, he can stop the funding of World Bank or whatever, but I don't know what he's going to do. But at the moment, IFC and some other organizations are continuing business as usual of what they want to do on the climate finance. In fact, I was saying PBA and IFC had a wonderful meeting just last week on this issue. As I said, Director of Climate Finance from Washington was here. So that part is continuing to grow.
So the businesses that had invested in climate finance are business as usual for them, and nothing has changed as yet.
At the moment, there's nothing changed just because Mr. Trump is right now busy on some other issues. But so let's keep our fingers crossed.
Okay. I think it's always better for Pakistan not to come too much in Mr. Trump's notice. It doesn't bode well for such countries. My second question was AI and digitization.
Digitization, as I said, digitization was part of this. There was one session, and we had a speaker from Imperial College London. We had a speaker from Dubai, Mr. Corey Thompson, who is head of the digital side of Mashriq Bank. And banks are aware of that. State Bank is aware of that. Even SCCP is aware of that. So we are doing it very rapidly. And the banks are at the moment, I don't know whether you know about the case of RAST, which the State Bank is pushing. So that is a fantastic effort of digital payments, and it is growing very, very rapidly. So I'm quite happy at the moment on the digitization on the banking side, but we thought we should pay more attention. That is why the 3 priority areas that we identified about a year back, one is SME, agri-financing, and indeed digitization.
Another thing that was launched at the Pakistan Banking Summit was eKYC, but not a lot was talked about it. Could you explain that?
The reason we didn't have time, but we thought it was such a significant event that has taken place in terms of graduating on the IT side. eKYC is a project of the banking sector where we are using blockchain technology for the first time. So all 45 banks, including 8 are already there, 15 next are in the process at the moment. All the banks will be linked together, and instead of you have an account in Habib Bank, for example, so you go to open an account in UBL. So UBL does the same KYC again. So this will give an opportunity or a capability of the banks to go in the database. And if you see there was already done eKYC in Habib Bank, and chances are the banker at UBL will say eKYC is already done. Let me not waste too much time on that. So that a project, and it's a fantastic project. It will not stop at eKYC. We can build many other cases on top of that.
Each consumer could have a credit score the way it's there.
No, this has got nothing to do with credit score. This is just mere information, eKYC.
Would that help increasing the formal economy?
No, it has got nothing to do with that. It's just an information. It will make
streamlining
processes, and it will become easy for the customers to get their account open. Yeah, indirectly, you're right. It will inclusivity, that will add inclusivity.
Because I know, like when you go to an account and you need to have a utility bill or a phone bill or something, it's just tedious to shift accounts. Great. Thank you so much for your time, sir. This is very informational.
Thank you very much.